The Ice Queen of Brookshire Hills. Tiffany Carrington. A name that echoed through the halls of the most opulent mansions and the most exclusive gatherings. A name synonymous with wealth and privilege in Brookshire Hills. Tiffany was the epitome of high society, her life a glittering showcase of affluence and influence. Her world was a tapestry woven with threads of designer labels, luxury cars, and an endless parade of lavish parties. Every event was a spectacle, every appearance a statement. Tiffany moved through this gilded cage with an air of cool detachment, her heart seemingly encased in ice. She was a figure of beauty and grace, yet her eyes betrayed a sense of ennui. She was used to getting what she wanted, when she wanted. Shopping sprees, extravagant gifts, and the finest dining experiences were her everyday reality. Her parents, blinded by their love and preoccupied with maintaining their social standing, rarely denied her anything. They believed that showering her with material wealth was the key to her happiness. Tiffany, in their eyes, could do no wrong. She was their perfect daughter, the jewel in their crown, and they were proud of her every achievement, no matter how trivial. A dangerous assumption, as it turned out. Their unwavering adoration and lack of boundaries would soon lead to unforeseen consequences. The rules didn't apply to her, or so she believed. Speed limits, social graces, even common courtesy, all were beneath the Ice Queen of Brookshire Hills. She lived by her own set of rules, unchallenged and unchecked. Speed limits, social graces, even common courtesy, all were beneath the Ice Queen of Brookshire Hills. Her behavior grew increasingly erratic, her disregard for others more blatant. Little did she know, fate was about to deliver a harsh lesson in accountability. The world she had so carefully constructed was on the brink of unraveling, and Tiffany would soon face the consequences of her actions. The Ice Queen of Brookshire Hills was about to discover that even in her world of privilege, no one is truly untouchable. A night of reckless abandon. It began, as most of her reckless escapades did, with a party. This wasn't just any party, but one of those high society events where the champagne flowed like water and the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and cologne. The air crackled with the same manufactured laughter and vapid conversations Tiffany had come to expect. Boredom gnawed at her. She wandered through the rooms, each more opulent than the last, but none could hold her interest. She needed an escape, a rush, something to pierce the veil of her indifference. The glittering chandeliers and designer dresses did nothing to quell the restlessness that churned within her. Downed shots of tequila burned a fiery path down her throat. Each shot was a small rebellion, a defiance against the monotony that threatened to consume her. The room tilted slightly, a dizzying prelude to the chaos that was to come. Her vision blurred, and the faces around her became indistinct, like a painting smudged by careless hands. Around midnight she stumbled out, keys to her father's Porsche 911 glinting in her hand. The cool night air hit her like a splash of water, momentarily clearing her head. The roar of the engine was a siren call to her restless soul. It promised freedom, an escape from the gilded cage of her life. The world outside became a blur of flashing neon lights and the angry blare of horns. The city was alive, pulsing with a frenetic energy that matched her own. Tiffany, fueled by alcohol and a dangerous sense of invincibility, pushed the car to its limits, laughing in the face of danger. The speedometer climbed higher, and with it, her exhilaration. But her reckless joyride was short-lived. The screech of tires, the crunch of metal, and the sudden jarring stop brought her crashing back to reality. The aftermath was a blur of flashing police lights and the cold, hard truth of her actions. siren song of the sirens. Red and blue lights flashed, slicing through the darkness. The piercing wail of sirens shattered the night. A police car, alerted by her reckless driving, pursued her. The chase was on. Adrenaline surged through Tiffany's veins. Fear warred with a strange sense of excitement. She pushed the gas pedal harder, her pulse pounding in sync with the revving engine. The world outside shrunk to a tunnel of speeding lights and the insistent scream of the siren. For a moment, she felt alive, invincible. But the illusion was quickly fading. The police car gained on her, its presence a stark reminder of the real world, a world where actions had consequences. The long arm of the law, a phrase that carries weight, authority, and an unyielding sense of justice. The Porsche screeched to a halt, tires protesting against the asphalt. The sound echoed through the night, a sharp contrast to the usual hum of the city. The police car boxed her in, its presence suffocating. There was no escape, no room for negotiation. The flashing lights painted a grim picture of inevitability. Two officers approached cautiously, their faces grim in the flashing lights. They meant business. Every step they took was measured, every movement deliberate. Tiffany remained in the driver's seat, a statue of defiance. Her eyes were fixed forward, her jaw set in a stubborn line. She was not going to make this easy. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Each beat was a reminder of the gravity of the situation, a drum signaling the approach of an inevitable confrontation. The officers ordered her out of the car. Their voices were firm, leaving no room for argument. This was not a request, it was a command. Their voices, sharp and edged with authority, finally pierced through the haze of her intoxication. The reality of her situation began to sink in, cutting through the fog like a knife. She stumbled out, her legs unsteady beneath her. The ground felt foreign, as if it were shifting beneath her feet, a cruel reminder of her impaired state. The cold night air hit her like a slap, clearing some of the fog in her mind. It was a harsh wake-up call, a reminder of the reality she could no longer escape. The officers moved with practiced efficiency, snapping handcuffs around her wrists. Their actions were swift, leaving no room for resistance or hesitation. The cold metal bit into her skin, a harsh symbol of her fall from grace. She looked down at the handcuffs, the reality of her situation sinking in. This was the end of the line, the moment where everything changed. The police station was a cold, sterile place. The smell of stale coffee and despair hung heavy in the air. Tiffany, stripped of her freedom and her sense of invincibility, felt a wave of nausea wash over her. The booking process was humiliating. Fingerprinting, mugshots, the inventory of her belongings, each step chipped away at her carefully constructed facade. The other detainees, a motley crew of society's castaways, watched her with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. The weight of her situation crashed down on her. This wasn't a scene from a movie. This was her life now. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. Tears welled up in her eyes, blurring the harsh fluorescent lights. Her father arrived at the station looking ashen-faced and furious. His disappointment was palpable. It cut deeper than any lecture or punishment ever had. Gone was the usual indulgent twinkle in his eyes, replaced by a cold fury that chilled Tiffany to the bone. He spoke to the police officers in hushed, clipped tones, his jaw clenched tight. He signed the necessary paperwork, his signature shaky with suppressed rage. When he finally turned to her, the look in his eyes made her shrink back. He wasn't there to rescue her, not this time. "You're staying," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. "Maybe this will teach you a lesson. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving Tiffany to face the consequences of her actions alone. The charges were serious: driving under the influence, reckless driving, evading arrest. The judge, a stern woman with eyes that missed nothing, set her bail at an amount that made even Tiffany's father balk. He refused to pay. Tiffany would spend the night in jail. The cell was small and bare, the air thick with the stench of sweat and fear. She had never felt so alone, so utterly lost. The gravity of her situation pressed down on her, suffocating her. The hours crawled by. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. All she could do was think about her reckless actions, her sense of entitlement, the people she had hurt and disappointed. The guilt was a heavy weight, dragging her down. The next few months were a blur of court appearances, lawyer consultations, and the soul-crushing reality of community service. Gone were the designer clothes, replaced by the rough, shapeless orange jumpsuit. Tiffany, stripped of her privilege and forced to confront the consequences of her actions, began to see the world through new eyes. The world outside the gilded cage of Brookshire Hills was a harsh, unforgiving place. She spent her days cleaning up trash along the highway, the stench of exhaust fumes a constant reminder of her fall from grace. She interacted with people she would have once considered beneath her, people whose lives she had never bothered to acknowledge. Tiffany Carrington's journey from privilege to consequence was a painful, humbling experience. The fall from grace had shattered her illusions of invincibility, forcing her to confront the ugliness of her own entitlement. The road to redemption was long and arduous. But somewhere along the way, amidst the garbage and the grime, Tiffany began to change. The ice around her heart started to melt, replaced by a flicker of empathy, a glimmer of understanding. She still had a long way to go. But for the first time in a long time, Tiffany Carrington dared to hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could rebuild her life, this time on a foundation of humility and accountability.